Okay, so we've just seen 2 episodes of Survivors. Sorry, and we have the wonderful Ian McCulloch here to talk to us about his experiences on the show. And I guess the best place to start, Ian, is talk us through the process of how you became involved in the show.
I went through a sort of rough time as an actor, and I thought I'm going to have to emigrate somewhere, and I thought I'm going to emigrate to Canada. I don't know why. I didn't know anyone in Canada. I'd never been there before, and I thought, well, I'm going to Canada. And then out of the blue, my agent rang me up and said, somebody at the BBC wants to see you for a part in Colditz. And I said, what is it? And she said, well, it's the guy who built the glider, and he's a hero. He was a head boy of school, captain of rugby, captain of cricket. Everyone at the school put him on a pedestal. He was the absolute perfect hero, and everyone adored him. And so when you go along, just make a point of being nice, being boyish, being public schoolish, and that's the sort of line to follow at the interview. So I went to the BBC and I met the director, who was Terry Dudley, the producer of that, Survivors. And I did all the things that my agent told me to do, and the interview seemed to go pretty well. And at the end of it, Terry Dudley pushed the script towards me and said, well, there's the script, the part's yours if you want to do it. And instead of saying something, the birth of a hero, it said odd man in. And it was the part of a cold-blooded shit whom everybody actually hated and wanted out of Colditz as soon as possible. It was exactly the opposite, what I was trying to convey in my sort of interview. Anyway, I did the part. It was a fantastic part, written by Arden Winch. It was, I think, one of the 6 best episodes of Colditz. And when they'd finished editing it, and they sort of said, well, Ian, this is going to do you a lot of good. And when don't even think about emigrating, because when it comes out, the phone won't stop ringing. So it went out. One person rang me up that night, who was an old friend from the Royal Shakespeare Company, who said I said nice things, and then the phone didn't ring at all, until a week later, and then it started ringing, and it didn't stop for about a month. And I did 3 big things. One I can't remember. One was a pilot version from a BBC Scotland version of the Forsyte saga called Wax Fruit. The other was a film which some of you may have seen called The Ghoul. And there was some other big nice thing which I sort of did, one after another. And everything looked absolutely lovely. And then again, just a little bit while after that, I got a phone call from Terry Dudley saying, I am now a producer. I am producing a series called Survivors. It's written by Terry Nation. We are going to start work on it in about 6 months, and I would like you to play the part of Greg, who is an American. And I, having loved doing Colditz, I said, include me in the team. So that's how I got into it.
I think one of the most magical things for me about Survivors was the way you never really knew where the story was going, because, you know, and forgive me if I'm wrong, but I seem to have a recollection you don't actually rock up until episode 2, do you?
Yeah, I'm not in the first episode.
And so the whole episode is based around different characters. Peter Bowles is one of the characters. And he, you know, at the time he was a very, you know, much in demand actor, and I think part of the magic is that he was bumped off, wasn't he, in the episode? And I think that was the first real twist of the series. And then of course you kind of bowl in and almost, you know, come in as the essential character, not necessarily from the start. And when did you realise that the show was doing something different to almost everything else that was on television at that time? When was the moment you thought to yourself, this is something really special?
Well, I mean, we were told by Terry Dudley that it was going to be something special, that nothing had been done like it before. the way we were going to do it was sort of pioneering, just sort of using outside broadcast cameras. All the camera crew were people who normally did Match of the Day and did sports things. And it would be done on location. There would be no music at all. It was going to have a female lead, that was going to be Carolyn. And it was going to be done in a very sort of sparse sort of way. We were going to film it in the middle of nowhere, where there were no planes flying overhead. And then, as you say, I wasn't in the first episode. And the first episode is the very best episode of all. And to me, not just because I wasn't in it, but I think it's the best first episode of anything that I've seen on television. You said sparse. I mean, it is done in such a sort of spare way. The acting is so good, and nothing's forced on you. It just sort of happens. And when you think of how they could have filmed it, I mean, they filmed it by not filming. I mean, they made the effect by not filming. You saw all those cars and the sort of motorway and things, but you didn't really see that many sort of dead bodies. It was done. It was directed by Pennant Roberts, who was brilliant, I have to say, at first episodes. He did the first episode of this. He did the first episode of Blake 7. He did the first episode of that series about the boat company. I mean, he just had a way of the first episode was the very best episode that he did. But he set up these series in a wonderful, professional way. But that say, I just wish I had been in the first episode. But I think I may have spoiled it if I was.
I'm sure it would have been the case. It was, but it's a proper, that first series, it was like there was a dig in every single episode in the way television was at that time. And then I specifically picked Law and Order because although I was very, very young, I remember not so much the show, but the controversy about that specific episode. How do you feel about that episode in reflection?
Well, like you say, it was the most sort of controversial of them all. It was probably the best written of them all as well. I think every sort of point of view was expressed in it. I just had reservations about the way, it sounds ridiculous, that it worked out that she was killed. Because when she stabbed with an arrow, I just found that one bit. But it was sort of difficult to do. But again, that was one of the things that was virtually all sort of indoors, sort of done as if it had been a sort of studio. But everyone had a different view as we went through it. Although I think most of the cast sort of took a sort of fairly moral view. And unlike the one you've just sort of seen, where Peter Jeffries, the director, was horrified that my character was going to infect all these sort of people. I mean, he just thought it was morally, totally, absolutely wrong, like the other sort of character sort of says. But I say, it is the very best episode, and it's probably, other than perhaps the first episode, it's the one that most people remember and ask questions about. And
excluding the episodes that you were involved on the other side of the camera, so to speak, do you have a specific memory of an episode that you really enjoyed working on?
No, sadly, the one I remember is the one I had a hangover. It's just bizarre. I mean, it's one that involves the petrol tanker or whatever it is. And there was lots of running across ploughed fields. God, it was hell to do. And I just had this terrible, terrible headache. And it was almost, I don't know if you've been on location with the BBC team, but they keep on feeding you, and you're getting bacon rolls all day long. And the most horrific thing, personally, from my point of view, in the two series that I did properly, was one morning I had to open the bonnet of a Land Rover, and I bent over the bonnet, and I suddenly couldn't see my belt. And there was this huge bulge below my chest. And it was all these bacon sandwiches, and I thought, what the hell am I turning into? I mean, it was a horror film in itself. I know it's not the sort of answer you want.
And I think the character of Greg is really well written throughout because of the transformation of your character. because a lot of the other characters, they stay very similar, don't they? You 1 minute you're kind of you're aggressive, and then before you know it, you're in this kind of relationship where you've almost adopted these two children who are a pain in the arse. But do you know what I mean? I think how much of your overall story arc were you exposed to from the start? Because as I said, I really enjoy the fact that your character, 1 minute you're very, very warm, minute you're very, very harsh. And how much influence did you get in that?
Well, I mean, I think it's all written in the way Terry Nation described him as a sort of loner, didn't want to be involved, as he sort of says himself, I think, in the first sort of episode. And I just think as these things go on, you can't get nastier and nastier and nastier, because you'll end up doing an episode all on your own. And you sort of have, however much you don't want to, you have to integrate, and you have to be sort of part of a team. And I think the character just evolved that way. I mean, especially with the involvement of Lucy, who, as a person, as an actress, it's impossible not to become close to. These things came with the scripts. I mean, you didn't think they were actually written. I didn't change the character in any way. I mean, I only delivered the words that someone else had written. And most of them are written into 4 or 5 different authors in the first series. And they all had their different view. They've been given more or less told what to do by Terry Nation's earlier scripts or by the producer, but they wrote it the way that they wanted to do, not necessarily the way that I wanted to do. And I only, changed my opinion about things really doing the second series, when I thought I became really boring. And I say, so methane conscious as to be, a gas cloud for most of the series.
And where was that point that you thought to yourself, I need to,
leave?
Yeah. And how hard of a decision was that?
Well, it was a very, I've got I was going to bring it, because I have a letter from Terry Dudley, which he wrote to me after we were talking about my information to him that I was not going to do a third series. The point I made was that in leaving, I had to make a big decision to turn down another 13 episodes, almost 6 months to a year's work, all the benefits of that, and a considerable sort of wage, and to turn that down with nothing on offer, to me, was rather crucial to my life, and I was giving up quite a lot because I firmly believed in what I was saying, which was that the standard of the scripts in the second series had gone down. I mean, he obviously disagreed with me, and he said his problem was that he had run out of authors. And when we were doing the first series, and it was obviously being a success, and he said to me, really good writers were queuing up. They were his words. They were queuing up because they wanted to write for survivors, because it was such a fantastic idea and gave them such wonderful opportunities to express whatever they sort of felt needed to be expressed. And then suddenly in the second series, because of his fallout and disagreement with Terry Nation, he said there was no one else at all. So the scripts, as far as I was concerned, especially as far as my character was concerned, I just didn't feel involved as much as I did in the first. And to be kind and thoughtful, and I wasn't being selfish, I sort of said I didn't want to be in series 3, which was then planned. And he then said to me, well, I will try and sort this out, so give it 2 more episodes, and let me know what you think then. So I gave him advance warning. He gave me advance warning of how he was going to try and sort out my sort of problems. And the scripts that eventually came were just as bad, as far as I was concerned, as the ones before. And looking at it, because I would say I've got this book, where is it? The view, to me, I knew there was the interest from an audience's point of view was waning. And when they did this book, any of you have copies of this book? It was an amazing book, almost as good as Roger Marshall's book, but it is wonderful. But they have in here the viewing figures, and when the 2 people, Rich and Andy Priestner, were doing this, I referred to the viewing figures and saying that the audience had gone down, and he said, well, that actually isn't the case, because your episodes are the figures for them aren't actually very, very good. Which I found, said, well, the whole point about the viewing figures is it's the episode afterwards that tells you the success of the episode that went before it. And my viewing figures, which I had written down somewhere here, were the episode I did, this is the first one, A Friend in Need. The viewing figures for my episode were 8.38 million. And then the following up episode was 10 million people. That was, 1.5 million more people were watching the next episode because of my episode, which is the way I thought the series ought to go. And even The Friend in Need, which I didn't think was done very well, the actual number watching that particular one was 4.3 million. The follow-up episode, going the way I wanted the series to go, was 6.7. So I thought that made my point. And the other thing I've said to some people earlier today, the other thing that made my point was the series was a huge success in Italy, and that's why I did the sort of zombie films there. Italy, I got the jobs in Italy because the first series was such a huge success in Italy. And I was mobbed, and I was treated like a prince. When I went there to do my second film in Italy, nobody talked to me because they hadn't enjoyed it. And Italy didn't take the third series. And I think that just to me confirmed my suspicions about the way the series was going. Sorry.
So we've obviously talked about your exit, but then obviously you return in a couple of ways. Do you want to talk a little bit about what exactly brought you back?
Terry said to me, we have a continuity problem with your character not being in the series. So my offer to you is, you've written one episode, so you can write your own episode, you can write it, you can direct it, you can edit it, you can cast it, you can do the locations, you can do anything you want as long as you die at the end of it. And I said, well, that's what, I obviously don't want to do it all by myself. So I said, all right, I'd have to go at that. So I wrote the script. All these 3 scripts took me 1 week exactly to write. With my fingers and all the rest of it, they all took me a week to type, but they took me a week to actually write in longhand. And I gave him that one, which they accepted gladly. And then I just thought I would try and write an episode involving Lucy a bit more. So I said, could I write another one? So I then wrote A Friend in Need, which didn't turn out, I'm afraid, the way I wanted it to. But I did that one as well. And I was told that I said, and I want to work after it. I want people to know that I'm no longer involved in the series, and I'm free for any other work that's going. And Terry said it'll go out they'll both go out in the first 6. And A Friend in Need went out as episode 2, and the one you've just watched went out as episode 10. Yeah. Which didn't help my cause very much at all. But I wanted to write more, and the only other thing I ever managed to write, I wrote an episode of what was the series I was in? Secret Army.
Oh God, yeah.
I wrote, which I thought was a brilliant episode, because I'd been in Secret Army, and I wrote what I thought was a brilliant episode, and they turned it down because I didn't know enough about the series and the characters and how they were supposed to develop. And strangely enough, they replaced the episode that I wrote with an episode written by the producer himself, which actually happened in Survivors as well, because there is an episode written by Terry Dudley.
So here we are 50 years later, and Survivors, although the series ended, it never really ended, did it? Because you've got your Big Finish stuff, although obviously you're dead there, and just the love of the fans still to this day. How does it feel to be part of something that is still so widely loved?
Well, I mean, but I said it yesterday when I was talking about Survivors. It is amazing that it has such a loyal sort of fan base, helped by those good people who sort of ran the magazine and who have done the website, and some people that I can see in front of me who have been steadfast fans for all those sort of 50 years. I just find, I know that they are all there, and there are a lot of them. I just think that it is a real pity that the BBC doesn't seem to share their enthusiasm or their happy memories, or the fact that, a couple of years ago the same situation happened in real life. I had one phone call when COVID started from Radio Scotland, when I talked very, very sort of briefly about how prescient this was, and how Terry Nation at the time said, when someone said this is sci-fi, he said, no, this isn't science fiction, this is science fact. These diseases are here and they are going to happen, and we are going to be faced with similar situations. And I say exactly, it did happen that way, a couple of years ago. So I have no idea, and I find it rather disappointing that I wrote to the BBC last year. I thought what I could do was I could do a one-man show whereby I would sort of, as we're doing now, talk about Survivors and doing it and what happened afterwards, and then show this episode afterwards. And I wrote asking for permission to show this, which I have got. So, it took 6 months before I got an okay to do it. Even though I'd written it and played the leading part, 6 months, and I passed this news on to sort of Spencer, who's very kind to sort of show me here today. But that is all. I have heard nothing else about this sort of series. Everybody went wild about the 40th anniversary of EastEnders. And I hope no one here is a devoted fan, but there was the other series, which is the huge comeback of the Welsh series, whatever it was called, with Jen James, whoever went off to America. What's it called? Comedy series set in Wales and Essex. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
They may have learned it. I mean,
James Corden. Yeah.
That had more publicity than a major film.
Yes.
And as I said, I hope there aren't too many people I'm going to upset. I thought it was awful. Yeah. Really good people are all trying a little bit too hard and whatever. But I mean, fans, the papers obviously adored it. The reviews were perfect. But I just think it's rather sad that the BBC don't seem in the slightest bit interested about doing anything with this.
It's interesting you say that, because no sooner do we go into COVID than the BBC have entered into this partnership with ITV, and they think, this is great, we've got BritBox, let's put the Survivors on while everyone's in lockdown, panicking about survival. Let's show something, an image of that. And then, despite the fact that it sat at number 1 on BritBox for almost the entirety of the first lockdown, we go straight into back to reality, and they pulled it just like that. In an instant, boom, gone. No warning, no nothing. And it just solidifies what you're saying, really, that there seems to be a lack of respect of the product, that it could be so highly rated for such a long period in this current, almost like, within this decade, to suddenly just disappear in the blink of an eye. And now I don't think you can find it anywhere again. I think it's disappeared off the face of the earth, other than deleted DVDs.
Well, you're saying something which I couldn't understand, because in the magazine, the gone away, whatever, blown away, big, it sort of says it's been pulled by BritBox. I had no idea it had been shown on BritBox. I have to say, I didn't even know what BritBox was.
Right.
All I do know is that, having got no money from residuals, or very little residuals, for dozens of years, I got a huge amount of residuals from DVDs and whatever, out of the blue. And then that suddenly stopped. But I didn't know it was what. I thought it was people buying DVDs in America and Canada and all the rest of it.
Oh yeah, no, literally we strolled into COVID, and BritBox were like, yeah, let's chuck every single episode of Survivors out.
Well, A was good, B, it meant something, and I also just think it wouldn't cost them much money.
No.
We weren't paid a fortune I got £600 an episode, and I got £600 for each of my scripts. and this will cheer everyone up, who's buying a house now. I bought my first house, the first house ever bought by anyone in my family, in 1976 on the strength of the 2 episodes for the 3rd series, and it was a 3-bedroom house in Clapham which cost me £14,000,
Wow.
and now sells for just under £1 million.
That's
Wish
good.
I'd kept it.
I think we should go to audience questions, and I know we've got one right at the front.
Ian, congratulations. I mean, it's
Thank you.
fantastic. Your episode was absolutely fantastic.
Thank
and you mentioned that it took you a week to write these episodes. I mean, tell us a bit about your process then. What did you, in terms of working within the context of a series, and that you've mentioned that you were allowed to write what you wanted to. Tell us a bit about what was your construction for it? How did you create the script?
Well, yeah, that is a good question, and it's difficult to. The thing is, I didn't want to have a good death. I didn't want to have a heroic death, but death involving. I'd killed 6 people. I'd saved someone who was wounded, carried someone away to like a hero. I didn't want him to have a death like that. I wanted to have a death that was his own fault, which is partly heroic, but it is just he disappears because he's supposed to die because he's stupid. He's too suspicious to start with, and then he's too trusting. He's too opportunistic. He's too volatile. He doesn't think. I mean, it's his own fault. There are all sorts of ways in that episode that wouldn't have happened, but just because of his character and his stupidity, it's not he wasn't stupid. The character wasn't stupid, but he just walked into trap after trap after trap, and that was the way I thought I would get myself out of it, in a way which sort of made people feel sorry for being such an idiot, but at the same time had got rid of the sort of character for good. And I say once I started writing, everything sort of flowed. I didn't think one scene was going to follow another. I'd write one scene, and whatever was going to come next just came into my mind. Honestly, it is a talent, and it's a wish. It's a talent I wish I could have used a little bit more. I would love to have written more. I'm not brilliant, and it's sort of same as Terry Nation. It's written in the same sort of style. I think it's Terry Nation or Brian Clements. It's stuff that I used to sort of grow up watching. But I think I could have done more, and I would love to have done more. But I just thought that was the sort of ending he deserved. And there was a slight tinge, and I knew that if I wanted to, there was a way that I could have brought him back. Probably several ways, and which wouldn't have involved waking up in a shower.
Just a random question. Was there a point where you looked at the show and the story arc and you just thought, there's, in reflection, I guess, there's no way we can come back from this? Was there a specific point that you just looked at it and you thought, I would kind of so disapprove, or not disapproving, but do you get what I'm saying? I think sometimes you can look at something and you can categorically pinpoint the point that it went wrong. And for you, was there ever a point that you thought, actually, that's something
That the series had gone wrong?
Yeah.
Or the whole idea of the series was wrong?
Yeah, like it's just
was
taken a
gonna come to a dead
direction.
end.
Yeah. Was there a point?
No, I mean, it had a future way beyond 3 series if they wanted to do it, but because of the disagreement between Terry Nation and Terry Dudley wanted to do it his way. Terry Nation was really up. I asked him. I said, "Why? I couldn't understand why he wasn't around." And I said, "Because he was. We weren't friends, but he was very kind to me. He invited me down to open his sort of village fete in Tainham. I stayed in his wonderful Tudor house." Which had belonged to Thomas More's son-in-law, but wonderful Tudor house in Kent. And I sort of said, "Why aren't you writing anymore?" And he just, all he said was, "I didn't think I had anything more to contribute." No, which wasn't the truth. He had just violently disagreed with Terry Dudley. Terry Dudley was the boss, it was his way, and that was the way it had to go. And it didn't matter what Terry Dudley said, what Mr. Zelensky said, whatever. This is the way it was going to happen, and tough luck. And so he dropped out. So you would have thought normally that it would have gone on. And in the scripts that we got in the foreground, it described pandemic, plague, and whatever. But just one word before you saw the title and who it was written by. But the last one was hope. And that the music at the end of every episode gets lifted up in that there is something bright that's going to happen to us. And those of you that may remember the song that I sang in it, I was going to bring my guitar today, but the last time I played my guitar in here, I felt it was a disaster. So I've left it in my car outside of the car. But there's a song that said, if you keep on going, reaping and sowing, if you keep your love alive, you'll survive. And I think it's human nature to survive. I mean, that's why humans are humans and why we're all here, for the time being at least. But that's the thing that kept the whole series going, and would have kept it going had it not come to a full stop, because he got rid of Carolyn, he got rid of Terry Nation, he got rid of Jerry Blake. I mean, the first series, because it was all apparent, we all did it out of sheer love for doing it. Everyone put 100% effort into it. There were no starry performances. No one tried to sort of pull out any acting sort of plums, tried to seem more noticeable. And then you lost Carolyn, you lost Talflin, you lost the beautiful girl who played Wendy, you lost a director, you lost members of the crew who didn't turn up, and you were losing all the people who had so much enthusiasm and sort of kept it going. And then when people sort of came in, it was sometimes difficult for them, I think, to feel assimilated. No matter, I mean, I know Lucy and I tried perhaps too hard to try and involve them, but it split a little bit too much. And because of the way the scripts had been going as well, it just seemed to me that it was a downhill slide.
And before I go back to audience, so you said earlier on that there was an issue with the story and the fact that you had to die. So the presumption is, despite some point between the episode that followed yours, there was going to be a fourth series, because otherwise what's the point of getting rid of you? When did you know that it was over?
Well, as far as I was concerned, it was over when when I was recording this episode. I did them one after another, these two. I knew then that it was, because I'd been working at BBC Scotland. They said there was no way the series would go on. You can't lose the Carolyn, which is a disaster anyway, or me, or all the other people involved. And there wasn't really going to be any hope, despite some fantastic episodes that they had, like Mad Dog. I think it's a brilliant episode. But because of that, it was doomed.
Yeah. I've got some other questions out here. Lady at the front.
It might not be very tricky, but I personally didn't like it. But did you ever watch the reboot that they did?
I watched episode 1, and then I didn't watch any more. And I just thought there was one of everything. Every variation of human being, colour, creed, religion, height, size, sex. It was just too sort of reverential, and it didn't appeal to me. To me, it was a totally different show, as it had to be, and I could see why they weren't interested in me helping them in any shape or form. But I just found that rather disappointing. There was one casting thing, and it wasn't Greg, that I didn't think was right, so I didn't watch anymore. And I said they did 6, I think they did.
Yes.
But again, one knows that there are a mass of people who are hugely disappointed that it didn't go on. I mean, still to this day, people are writing in saying, we're left with an episode when you've got no idea how it goes on from here, what's happening to these people. And I say there are thousands of people who are still asking the BBC to move it on and continue the story.
The reason I'm looking at my phone is because I had a question that I was asked to ask you. There's a folk song that you did in Survivors. What's the title?
A folk song?
Yeah.
He was singing in the episode.
Yeah, he said. So this person who will be watching online has said there's a folk song Ian sang in Survivors, and I've always wanted to know the title. And I said I'll ask him.
I can't remember. In Lorna, do I sing the song? Are they dancing?
You're singing the song.
Is it about Jeremy? Is that I Want to Play with the...
I can't remember the words from it,
well,
but you were singing the song.
Okay, well...
I think it was in the corn dolly.
Is that the one? Is that Jeremy's song?
It was the corn dolly. You were playing in the corn dolly when you were making that. Remember that episode when you were...
Well, I'll try to... I think I sang, and God knows why they allowed me to do it. I mean, I've actually just recorded another song for Witches of the Sands, which is a film I did 2 years ago, which is soon to hit the screen. But I did two. In that earlier one, I sang Jeremy. I Want to Go and Play with the Boy Next Door, and I wrote it for the daughter of a friend of mine, a television director and actor called David Andrews. I had a daughter called Bronwyn who had a boyfriend next door who was 4 years old, the same as she was. So I wrote a song called I Want, and in that episode where I sang that, they only sing the verse over and over again. It is the most boring bit of the whole series. It goes on and on with me playing an out-of-tune guitar in a really, really bad and embarrassing way, and these poor, unfortunate children singing the same words over and over again. It is awful and embarrassing. But I mean, the song actually has a chorus, and it also has a lullaby which goes over the top of it, which is supposed to be sung by the parents. And it is actually a very pretty song. And of all the people I know who did love it, Angela Pleasance, who was Donald Pleasance's daughter, used to sing it to her son, and it was her favourite song. But the other song, which I think you're talking about, is a song I wrote, which was called "In all the days of danger, disaster and distress, and all the ways of woe and oh, so much unhappiness, people full of sorrow with no hope in their way, but life can be good tomorrow if you take care of today. You've got to keep on going, reaping and sowing. You've got to keep on giving, loving and living, and so on." So I think that is what they're sort of talking about. And what I'm hoping to do after this year is to involve that opening credit music written by Anthony Isaacs of Survivors, all that gloomy stuff, and then lead into this folk song, song anyway, and sort of make it available sort of somewhere. But I think that is the song he's referring to, I hope.
Me too. Have we got any other questions? Superintendent?
Boots?
I'm not a superintendent. Just wanted to say, I mean, as Ian knows, Survivors was my favourite programme when I was growing up as a kid. It was so influential, such big issues. And the thing I really liked about the series, which I can still remember now, is it really made you think about what was going on and project yourself into that situation and really think about what you would do. I would have been about 17 then. For a young man growing up, that was really an important development because you were able to think about some of the bigger issues in life and place yourself in that situation. So for me, it's one of the best series that has ever been on the TV, and these two episodes that you showed today were two of the best and really, really good selection. To make that statement into a question completely changed the tact. The other character that sort of, in effect, replaced you, Charles, what did you think about the way they developed that character and the performance of Charles, the character that sort of took over from you as the main male lead from you?
From a personal view, there's an awful lot actually being written about that, which is not true. I never fell out with Dennis. I never had a quarrel with Dennis. And my fear was when Karen went, and I knew she wasn't going to be replaced by another girl, and I thought, who the hell are they going to be? They said someone from the first series, and my horror thought was that it was going to be who played Robin Hood. The Robin Hood character. Him, anyway. Yeah. Who has a sort of love relationship with Carolyn's character.
Yep.
Go on.
Richard Heffer.
Richard Heffer, yeah. I dreaded it being Richard Heffer because he was very, very good looking and so bloody dashing. And I was really pleased when it wasn't him. I think Dennis, well, all he's interested in is sort
It's
of,
women.
breeding and sort
Yeah.
of.
I mean, he was almost like a Mormon when he was doing
Well,
wives.
that's it.
Yeah.
But then when you come into something, you have to make the most of what you got, and that's what Dennis did. I mean, he played his part. He's a fantastic actor, and he is a brilliant comedian. I mean, I don't know if you've sort of seen some of the things he did, but the Blackadder. And
He was great, but he wasn't as good as you. We missed
I
you
wasn't in
much,
Blackadder.
I know you weren't in Blackadder.
Wish I was. No. I mean, I say if Heffer had done it, I'd have been desperate. I mean, I dreaded it happening. So no, you just did it and accepted it. But you can't get rid of so many people and people who are deeply involved in it and expect something to sort of go on and succeed.
The thing we know about quality TV nowadays is that none of it lasts forever, and there has to be an end, otherwise it just gets progressively worse and worse and worse, like a copy of something. So the series ended, it didn't end as it should have done, but there has to be an end for everything.
Well, the thing is, if you put enough money, I mean, in Doctor Who, it died a death a long, long time ago, and then they started spending money on scripts, money on sets, money on actors. Disney getting people, and that's added another 10 years to 15 years to Doctor Who's existence.
And as you said with the sort of remake, which I did watch and I did like, but it was not as good as the original series, it really, as you said earlier, ends in a terrible place where there's all this drama going on. The guy's on the plane, he's supposed to be going to the new community, you just don't know what happens, and he's just left, completely left. That's not how you want a series to end. You want a series to end with a proper end, not like they do in ones like Lost, but with a proper finish.
Well,
And Survivors did actually have the first series a proper finish.
yeah. Well, it did. But as someone in the powers that be just said, that's it, we've had enough, cut.
It
And
was a proper finish.
It's like, I mean, you talk about big finish. I mean, I was doing an episode and I was reading and said, it says I'm dead. Why are they talking about me as if I'm dead? I'm recording this episode. What? So it was a train crash. I said, what? I'm in a train. I'm laughing. I'm having a really good. What? And I rang up and they said, what's the matter? I said, well, you died in the series. And you die in this? I said, but I didn't sign up to die. And I didn't want to die in the first series. I did it because we had a disagreement. I didn't have a disagreement with Big Finish. I mean, I was, well, a little hurt. But that's it. The axe just comes down with no real apologies. And I say lots of people writing and say, why don't you? Why don't they pick it up again? Why are we left like this? Why wasted the money in the first place? And it's not fair on people like you who want to know what's happening. It's not really much fair on the actors who think they've got 6 months' work in front of them, and then it's no longer there.
Any other questions? I have one over here.
What was it like in the 70s, Ian, when you've got 3 channels and you've got an audience of, say, 8 to 10 million per episode? So that's a lot of recognition. What's it like when you go into a high street? Do you get stopped everywhere?
Well, that's a lovely question to ask because I think I've got a lovely answer. I mean, it was amazing. The best thing about it was policemen and parking attendants. You could park anywhere. I could go to Heathrow Airport, anywhere, picking someone up, dropping myself, whatever I was doing. They bent over backwards to be nice to you. The other side of the coin is, and it's a story I've told before, is you know when people recognise you. The look comes over their face. And it is an absolute true story. I was rehearsing at the Beeb. I left the BBC in my car. I went to a petrol station. I filled up. I went, paid the money, and I saw the guy looking at me as if to say, he's saying, I know you. And he said, do I know you? And I said, no, I don't think so. He said, have you been in here before? I said, no. Are you on telly? I said, yeah, sometimes. BBC? I said, yeah, sometimes. Wednesdays? I said, yeah. 8:10? I said, yes. I said, Survivors? I said, yes. He said, fucking awful. came straight out, but he led me on all the fucking way. And then the embarrassing ones are, we were filming in the Wye Valley, and we were in a pub having dinner, and there were lots of boys, young boys there with a scout group, whatever. And one by one, they all came over wanting autographs, and said, "Can I have your autograph?" And so you sign away. And when then one boy came, thumped down a piece of paper and a pen in front of me, and I said, "Look, I don't mind signing autographs, but I do expect to be asked." And the boy just looked at me, and then the master said, "He's deaf and dumb." I mean, he couldn't. So it didn't cost me a round, but I did have to buy him some food. So. But it has its bonuses. And the other thing is, did I tell the story yesterday about survival in Italy? About
being followed,
mafia,
yeah, but not on camera.
Well, again, it's the same sort of thing. When I was doing, because of Survivor, I was doing these Italian films, and I thought that the mafia were going to kidnap me. I was absolutely convinced the mafia were going to get me, and I was going to be the first person they were going to get from Britain. God knows why. And then one day I was wandering around, and I knew I was being followed, and I got really worried, and I quickened my pace, and I turned left, turned right, looked in a shop, stood still for a while, kept on going. This guy kept on following me, and I was getting more and more sort of worried. And I eventually turned down one way, and it was a cul-de-sac. There was nothing in front of me, a fence or something. And I thought, what the hell do I do? And I turned round just to confront him, and as threatening away as possible. I said, "Yes, see?" And I'll say it in English. And he just looked at me, and we just stared around, and he said, in English, he said, "Survivors?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Well done." Which I say wasn't the same. When I was making my last Italian film in Colombia, I went to buy some presents for some friends, and when I got back to my hotel room, the door room was open, and I knew I'd locked it, so someone had got in. And when I went in, I looked around, and then couldn't see anything. And then suddenly a cupboard door opened, and out came this man. And I said in intent, "What are you doing?" "Okay, fine. What are you doing?" And he said something in Spanish, and I was frightened. So I grabbed hold of him, pulled him out of the door, and into the corridor. And then we just stared at one another. He was very small. He was just over 5 foot. I'm 6 foot. I just sat down, just looked at one another, and I screamed out, "Polizia," which again is Italian, nothing to do with Spanish, so ridiculous. And he just stood there, looking at me, just with a funny little moustache, sort of nasty eyes, and he looked up at me, and I noticed he was standing with his legs apart, so I knew what heroes do is they kick them in the balls. So I walloped this poor little soul so hard. Oh, I mean, I used to be a really good rugby player, and I could convert a ball from halfway, an old leather ball. A vicious kick. He just stood there. It made no difference whatsoever at all. And then he ran away, so I chased him. And I chased him down, and he ran into the hotel kitchen, and all the staff were sort of looking up in amazement. No one was doing it, and he picked up a knife, a carving knife, and he threatened everyone. And I looked around and said, "Who's going to help me?" Nobody came forward to help me. There was no saucepan I could pick up. I didn't want to pick up a knife. There were no chairs that I could throw at him. So I thought, well, I'm a hero in this film. I've got to grapple with him. So I grappled with him, and he slashed my wrist. If any of you have seen the film, there's a continuity problem in the New York scenes because I've got a bandage on my wrist, which I never had before. And I grappled with him, and he obviously got away because I was so feeble. And he ran away into the cellars of the hotel, and he was caught by the police. He threw away the presents that I bought, and the hotel staff picked them up and kept them. And I had to go to a local police station and identify him. And to my embarrassment and shame, I have to say I didn't actually recognize him, but I said it was him anyway. This poor little soul. He did have a moustache, but it could have been anyone, but I said it was him. And whoever that person was got 7 years in jail in Colombia, which I don't think would have been very nice to do. So, celebrity.
Okay, well, thank you very much.